What is up, my bodyweight warriors, and welcome back to another video. Today I want to chime in on a topic and a question that I get asked all the time, and that is, does stretching reduce your risk of injury? In the short answer, it is a no, not necessarily, and it kind of depends on you, the individual. Flexibility is very much sports or goal specific. It's going to depend on why you are doing it and what sort of flexibility you need to do the sport or the activities that you are choosing to do. I've actually done an entire video on this tool, Don't Make This Stretching Mistake, and it talks about the idea that you want to stretch tight muscles and you want to stretch for your goals, and that is really what we want to be focusing on. Because when it comes to stretching to prevent injury, both too much and too little flexibility can cause your injury risk to go up. Let me give you a couple of examples. So we take a very common sport and a pastime that people do, and that is running. When it comes to running, you often see this notion that people want to stretch the hamstrings. People get really tight hamstrings and they complain that they get really tight lower limbs when they're doing running. And actually, this is an adaptation to the sport you're doing. The reason your lower limbs get tighter is because it creates more of a spring that allows you to transfer more of that kinetic energy, and it actually makes your running economy much better. So in this circumstance, the reason you're getting tight limbs is because your body's trying to adapt and get better at running. So in this particular instance, stretching would not only decrease performance, but it might actually increase your risk of injury. What we might want to do instead is work to strengthen those hamstrings, because the risk of injury might come from that our quads become much stronger than our hamstrings. So strengthening the hamstrings rather than stretching them would actually probably make you a little bit more flexible, but also reduce your risk of injury. Then if we look at the other end of the spectrum, we look at something like somebody doing a handstand. In comparison to running, which requires very minimal amounts of flexibility, the handstand requires a very good level of shoulder flexion mobility. So if this person doesn't have the flexibility and the requirements to perform and get their hands into that overhead position, then number one, their performance and the efficiency in the handstand is not going to be good, but also their risk of injury, because they're trying to force their shoulders into a position they can't get into, means that that's going to go up. So we have the opposite issue. The last point I want to make, and one of the key predictors when it comes to injury, is the difference between passive and active flexibility. Passive flexibility is kind of that max range of motion that you can get your body into using some external force, whereas active flexibility is the amount of movement that you can then control and use. So this really applies to people who are hypermobile. They have a lot of passive range of motion, they can get into splits easily, they can do all sorts of things and move their joints about really easily, but they actually don't necessarily have the strength and control to move through that range of motion, and that's why we see the risk of injury go up. So basically, to summarize, you need to stretch for the sport you're going to do. If you're doing a sport that requires a range of motion, then stretching it and having the flexibility to use that is going to reduce your risk of injury. And in the case where you don't necessarily need some flexibility, then stretching isn't going to reduce it, but making sure you have the correct structural balance is what's going to reduce your risk of injury. And then in the case of being hypermobile, just making sure that you focus more on active flexibility and strength through range of motion rather than just passive flexibility is going to be the key there. So I hope that kind of gives you a good overview of the myth that surrounds the fact that stretching can reduce your risk of injury. It really depends on you, the individual, and that's what this is all about. If you enjoyed this video, hit that thumbs up button, support the channel. If you have any questions about what I've talked about in this video, and I'm sure there will probably be some questions, why not leave it down below? I do my best to respond to every single comment I get on this channel. If you want to support the channel, support the work I'm doing, you can head over to my store and grab yourself some merch or a resistance band or something to help your training. And if you just don't want to miss any more videos, why not hit that subscribe button and join the Bodyweight Warrior tribe. But that has been it for this week, guys. Have a strong and stretchy week. Peace.